benefit the environment and economies of the Lake Champlain Basin. Watershed Alliance aims to reach K-12 students and their teachers throughout the Lake Champlain Basin. Our goal is to increase awareness and knowledge of watershed issues in youth throughout Vermont and New York. The Zoom a Scientist series was created in response to the current need for more virtual programs. So every Tuesday and Friday from now until the end of June, so we're sadly nearing the end, we'll be hosting a guest scientist to tell us more about their research. This is being live streamed at our YouTube channel, so feel free to go to our website or to our YouTube channel, and you can see previous presentations in case you missed them or you want to forward them on to family members, etc. But without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenter. So Rachel is a UVM Master of Science candidate in Natural Resources at the University of Vermont. She's originally from Edgewater, Maryland, and grew up minutes from the tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay, where her interest is in all things water related, or it really began. Rachel's research focuses on citizen science programs, specifically to learn what motivates people to volunteer to monitor streams and actions they take as a result of participation. So what are we going to be learning about today? How do we know if our streams are healthy? Volunteer stream monitors collect data to help scientists and local decision makers determine the health of rivers and what factors may be impacting their conditions. Learn what motivates stream monitors in parts of the United States, Canada, and New Zealand through a research study that considers if an attachment to place affects reasons why people volunteer and outcomes of participating in stream monitoring programs. So virtual round of applause. Rachel, we would love to see your presentation. I'm going to let you share the screen from here on out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline, for that introduction. Let me just get set up here.
And while Rachel is doing that, just letting you all know, Nate put in a link into the chat box that if you click on that and you want some closed captioning, we have somebody joining us, which is phenomenal, to do some live captioning as this is happening.
Okay, so you should see the first slide now.
Yep, you are good to go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again for that introduction, Caroline. Thanks to you all for being here today. As Caroline mentioned, I'll be talking with you about my master's research, which is on volunteer stream monitoring and what motivates people to get involved with these programs. So to begin, I'd like to show this word cloud, which some of you may have seen something similar before. So this is all of the different terms and names that are used to describe what we call citizen science, which you may be familiar with. So citizen science is getting the public or getting people involved in scientific research who are not trained scientists. Some of you maybe participate in this, or maybe you've heard of it before. So you'll see the term citizen science in the middle of this word cloud here. And then all of these other phrases and terms around it are different names for citizen science. This is not all encompassing. There are different terms that are used as well. This was put together by my research advisor, Chris Stepanek. So I wanted to show this to give you all an idea of how many different terms there are to talk about what I'm going to be talking about today. So not to be confusing, but I will be using volunteer monitoring, more specifically volunteer water monitoring, since the people I work with are monitoring streams specifically. But some of the other names are public participation in scientific research. That's pretty common. Lay monitoring. If you're from Vermont, you might have heard of the Vermont Lay Monitoring Program, where volunteers go out and collect data about lakes in Vermont, as well as community science, community-based monitoring. And these terms are pretty universal, actually globally. Citizen science is by far the most common that people are familiar with. But for example, some of the groups I work with in Canada refer to it as community-based monitoring because it's community-driven. Other people might call it something like collaborative research because there's a bunch of people working together. So anyway, just to give you an idea of what I'll be talking about today and how many different ways people might refer to this if you hear of it in the future. So volunteer monitoring, more specifically, is monitoring the conditions of local streams, lakes, estuaries, wetlands, and groundwater resources by trained volunteers. So again, these people are volunteers. They're not getting paid. They're doing this on their own time because they want to be involved. So in the photo here that you're seeing, this is a photo of people doing exactly that, monitoring this stream. In this particular image, they're measuring the width of the stream. And in the center, you can see a person holding what we call a D-net. And you use that to collect benthic macroinvertebrates, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But they're basically little bugs that live in the stream, and they give you an indication of how healthy the stream is, what stream health is. So you can see this as a collaborative effort. Typically in these programs, people work together. Perhaps they'll monitor a site individually, but there is some group component. You're joining a group, a program that does some sort of monitoring. Without further ado, I'll move forward talking about volunteer water monitoring specifically. So these programs in the United States specifically are scattered throughout most states. This is some work of, again, of my research advisor, Chris Stepanek. Displaying this particular image shows the blue icons. It's 284 volunteer water monitoring programs across the United States. So you can see these programs go all the way from Florida up to Alaska. This is not all of the programs. So this image you're seeing, these blue icons are what we call parent programs. So think of it like an umbrella. This is your umbrella organization. And these umbrella organizations might have many smaller groups that follow the same sort of protocols that fall under that umbrella. So in total, we estimate that there's about 1,700 volunteer water monitoring programs across the United States. So this is a huge effort, a great way for people to get involved, but also a great way for scientists and local decision makers to gather data about our nation's streams. And this was recently updated just this year. So this is not all of the citizen science programs in the US. This is water monitoring specifically. So to give you an idea of what other programs there might be, some people might go bird watching. That's a really common citizen science program, as well as bees. A lot of people will look at bees and how many times a bee visits a flower, something like that, to get an idea of pollination habits. So some people are involved in beekeeping. Others, they have citizen science projects for stargazing as well, looking for galaxies, going through photos and helping, astrologists look for different kind of things in space and things like that. So there's a bunch of different citizen science programs, but moving forward, I'm focusing specifically on those that are stream related. So before jumping into my research, I just want to give you an idea of some of the reasons why people get involved in citizen science. So what motivates people to get involved with these programs? And the reason I'm interested in this is because it's helpful for program managers to understand why people get involved with a program, because it can help to structure the program in a way that attracts volunteers. If you know why people want to get involved, then you can structure your program in a way that makes it attractive or targets the things people are interested in, because ultimately you want it to be an enjoyable experience for volunteers as well. And there are things that come out of these programs as well, which are what I'll be talking about next, is the outcomes of participating in these programs. So what comes out of people's participation? So across the board, this is citizen science in general. These are some of the reasons people get involved. They want to help the environment. They want to be social. Maybe they have friends who are involved, or they want to meet new friends. Perhaps they just like getting outside. This is a great way to do that. Perhaps it's related to their career. Maybe they're a former zoologist or something like that, former scientist of some sort, and they want to continue doing work that's similar to what they used to do. Or maybe they're a doctor and they want to learn more about bees or plants or something like that. So these are some of the reasons across the board that people decide to get involved with citizen science. But the number one typically is helping the environment. And this is a review I did of science articles. And so I found that in most articles I read about what motivates people to get involved with these programs, most commonly, the number one reason was to help the environment. Now, some things that come out of these programs include things like knowledge gain. So after you're involved with the program, you learn something, you gain some new knowledge about whatever it is that you're volunteering to do. Perhaps there's a change in your behaviors. Maybe you're monitoring a stream and decide that you now want to build a rain garden in your yard. Perhaps, you chat with your neighbor on a walk. They're walking their dog, you see them down the street and you say, hey, did you know that, something about bees, or, did you know we had, robins that live here, or something like that. And so that's social diffusion, the spread of knowledge and what you're learning about. So these are some of the things that come out of these sorts of programs. Another additional benefit of participating. And place attachment is one of these outcomes. And that is something I am personally interested in. So if you think about it, you're involved in a program, you go to a particular place, do your volunteer work, and over time, you feel attached to that place. You develop an emotional connection. And what I was interested in that kind of fueled the idea for this project is place attachment also a motivation? Do people already feel attached to a place and then they decide to get involved? So as I said, place attachment is basically a bond between a person and a place. It's an emotional connection. So think about a place that you feel connected to. Maybe it's the creek in your backyard. Maybe it's a park you went to as a child. Some place. It can be any place. Doesn't necessarily have to be outside even. Maybe it's a library that you spent a lot of time in. That is what place attachment is. And in this image I'm showing, I was in British Columbia for my research, and the person in the photo is my collaborator with her dog, and she took me to this place. She had place attachment for this place. It was something that was special to her, and she wanted me to experience it while I was there. And I just think this is a great example to think through, what does this term mean? It's actually rather complex, so I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty of how to unpack place attachment, but think of it just like an emotional connection to a place. So the big question that I'll be talking about today is what motivates people to volunteer to monitor streams? Why do they get involved and do what they do? But before I jump into that, I'll start with my first question before beginning, just to review. So what is another name for citizen science? And I think here Caroline's going to jump in. I'll let her take over.
Yep, let me just relaunch the poll from when we did it earlier as a demo. So what is another name for citizen science? Is it A, public participation in scientific research, B, community-based monitoring, C, volunteer monitoring, D, environmental collaborative monitoring, or E, all of the above? So we've got some answers rolling in. So again, what is another name for citizen science? I'll give it 5 more seconds. All right, Rachel, I think we've got a unanimous vote. So what do you think?
That's awesome. Yep, correct. All of the above.
Awesome.
Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, so as y'all said, all of the above. Many names for citizen science. So as you got from the introduction Caroline gave, my research is global. It's an international project. So I had the joy and the fortune to work in the US, Canada, and New Zealand. It was a collaborative effort of people who were interested in learning more about their volunteers. So in the US, I work with the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring. They're based out of Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, but I also worked with groups in New York. Both of the groups in New York and Pennsylvania were all within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. In Canada, I worked with groups who were part of the Columbia Basin Watershed Network over there in British Columbia, and that kind of blobular shape is a rough outline of the Columbia River watershed. So that's about where those groups were. And in New Zealand, the groups were part of the Stream Health Monitoring and Assessment Kit program, which is part of New Zealand's National Institute for Water and Atmospheric Research, which is the equivalent of our NOAA. You can think of it that way pretty much, across both the North and South Island in New Zealand. So I won't bore you with the data collection in detail, but just to give you an idea of what I did, I administered an online survey to volunteers in all of those places. It was all via email. And I got contact information from our collaborators and administered a survey, which you see on the left of your screen in that green box there is just a screenshot of the first page. So everyone I sent the survey to, if they were interested to participate, took this online survey. And in the process of that, they actually created an anonymous code. So I don't know, who said what. And after the survey was closed, I randomly selected a subset of those codes and then reached back out to volunteers and asked them to participate in an in-person interview. Some interviews I was unable to do in person, and they were held over Zoom or Skype or phone. So on the right, there's an image. I got to travel to all of these places and go talk with people. So this is a photo in Canada. I got to attend some meetings. Their network was in transition period. So it was actually a really awesome experience for me to get to go and be part of these meetings where they discuss with their volunteer groups how they'll be transitioning into a new network. So I sent the survey to about 230 total volunteers. This is a rough number only because some groups have privacy restrictions. So I wasn't able to know exactly the number of people that it was sent to for some groups, but roughly 230 people got the survey. And out of that, 101 people completed or partially completed the survey. Partially completed, I included those that were not fully complete because they still provide valuable information to the questions that were answered. And that's about a 44% overall response rate, which I was pretty happy with. That's pretty great for a survey, especially an online survey that's administered internationally. So I was happy with that. And then the interviews, I was aiming for about an equal number of interviews in each place. I got 9 in the US, 6 in Canada, and 9 in New Zealand. And part of the research is place attachment, which is why I was able to go to these places and talk with people. So I was able to learn about the place where they monitor, the place where they live, what's it like, what's their relationship with it. So this photo on the far left is my collaborator, and in the center is one of the volunteers. You'll see him, he has gloves on. We went out and spent a full day doing their monitoring effort. I got to go to many of their stream sites and do some monitoring with them, which was a really neat experience. And this photo is from their local newspaper, came out and interviewed us and wrote up a story about what this particular volunteer group did. So that was really neat to get to be a part of as well, and chat with people, see their sites and see the work that they do. So I thought I'd spend a bit of time sharing my experience. I thought that might be of interest to folks because I did get to go to these places. So this is British Columbia in Canada. I spent the week of our Thanksgiving there, and their network meetings was set up as a roadshow. So I was able to see a good bit of that Columbia River watershed that I showed you before, because we drove all around to each of the meetings. It was held in 4 different cities over the span of 4 days. So I saw a lot in a very short amount of time, which was really neat to get to see this place, to see some of the rivers and the places people go to do their monitoring work. And then, as I mentioned before, I did get to go sit in on these some of their meetings and give a preliminary update of, hey, this is where my research is at this point. This was back in November. And a lot of these people took the survey. So that was really neat to get to meet them, see them in person, match a face to some of the people I had communicated with via email. And I did do a few interviews here in person. Due to the roadshow, these were some of the ones that were held over Zoom. And then in New Zealand, this is the part of the day that I spent going monitoring with the group. So on the left, you'll see, this is their kit, their assessment kit. And you'll see in there's rubber gloves in a bag, there's some hand sanitizer, they've got pH strips. So this is some of the equipment these volunteers use to determine the health of their stream. In the center, that's another picture of a D-net, which collect benthic macroinvertebrates. So a benthic macroinvertebrate benthic means bottom. So they live on the bottom of the stream. Macro means you can see it with your eye, and invertebrate means that it does not have a spine. So if you feel the back of your neck, as we know, you feel your vertebrae. So these little critters don't have a spine. We call them BMIs for short. And then on the far right, that's that same volunteer collecting a water sample. This particular group took E. coli, incubated for E. coli, and I got to participate, which was pretty neat. So this is me doing a water clarity test. As you can tell from the photo, the water was super clear. And this is actually a very healthy stream. So they don't have many issues with pollution or anything like that. So this was pretty cool to get to spend some time with their volunteers and be part of their effort. So these are some pictures of the monitoring sites in New Zealand. This upper right photo, I'm going to try to use my cursor here. This is a little beetle that was what I was trying to take a picture of because we were trying to identify it, didn't know what it was. This is an exoskeleton of a BMI, so it's not the living creature, but you get an idea for what they look like. So we collect these and identify them. Here's a bucket that we put them in. I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of small, but there's another BMI right here. So this is what I got to do when I was visiting these places and meeting with people. So now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what motivates people in each country to get involved, and why do we care about this? Well, it's because, as I mentioned before, if we know why people are getting involved, it can help the programs to be more successful. So in the survey, I gave about a 15-item list of different reasons why people could have gotten involved with the program. It included place attachment items such as I identify with this place, but it also included things like, I care about the fish and aquatic life, or, I wanted to be with friends. So I asked people in the survey to either agree or disagree with how strongly they could relate to that particular item. And then from those that they agreed with, I asked them to rank their top 3 motivations. So what were the 3 main reasons they got involved? And here I'm going to share with you the #1 reason why people got involved in each place. So in the US, most people were concerned about water quality issues. That was the main driver for participating in these programs. In Canada, most people wanted to help protect or restore aquatic ecosystems. So going back to that idea of helping the environment. And in New Zealand, most people were concerned, again, like the US, about water quality issues. Now we can speculate why there's a difference between these countries. I wasn't looking into why there was a difference in my research, but we see that there is. It could be due to program structure. That's something that we being the team and I have talked about. Perhaps programs are structured a little bit differently. They tend to be a little more grassroots in Canada and perhaps not as much in the United States, and a combination in New Zealand. That might be why. But we do see a bit of a difference, but overall people are concerned about something, want to help, want to do something. I also asked how long have people been involved in the program? When did they start? And so we actually saw about a 50-50 split. This is between from those 101 people that took the survey. So just under 50% were what we call new volunteers. And those people began monitoring in 2018 or 2019, so I had to think about that. I administered the survey in the summer of 2019. So the past 2 years, the 2 most recent years, they're considered new. And then anyone who had monitored longer than that was considered an experienced volunteer. And the reason we wanted to know this is because we're curious if what motivates people to first join the program is different than what causes them to continue over time. And this is important for recruitment and retention rates, because if motivations change over time, then that means that perhaps as people are there longer, maybe there needs to be a bit of a change to the structure of the program to keep people wanting to come back. So we saw that those new volunteers, again, wanted to help protect or restore aquatic ecosystems. But those people who were more experienced were more concerned about fish and or other aquatic life. Again, we can only speculate into why there's a difference. I'm not looking into why that is, but just that there is a difference. Perhaps experienced volunteers, maybe they know a little bit more. Maybe now they know what fish are in that stream, or what submerged aquatic vegetation or plants are on the stream bank. And so now they know more about what's there, and now they're concerned about that, the health of those species. So coming to a close here, starting to wrap up, I'll let Caroline take back over with this second question.
All right, let me launch this poll. Should be popping up on your screen right now. And it says, in the US, what was the #1 reason why people decided to participate in their stream monitoring program? Was it A, they wanted to contribute to scientific knowledge? B, they wanted to help protect or restore aquatic ecosystems? C, they were concerned about water quality issues? Or D, they identified strongly with the place where they monitor? So again, in the US, what was the #1 reason why people decided to participate in their stream monitoring program? Give you another 5-ish seconds to think that one through. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And what do you think, Rachel?
You all are awesome. 100% again, that is correct. People were concerned about water quality issues.
All right, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. So to wrap up, I'd like to leave with just a couple quotes. I know I focused mostly on the survey in this presentation, but the interviews are also a big piece of this research. And getting to sit down and chat with people about their experience was super valuable. And I really enjoyed meeting everyone who chose to participate in an interview. And this top quote is something that someone had left in a survey comment. They said, "We all have a role in mitigating the impacts of human settlement on the environment. This is one step that we in this community can take." I wanted to include this because I felt like it just really encompassed the general sense of what I got from people in the survey and in interviews. They just wanted to get involved. People wanted to help. They feel that they have a role in helping the environment and in their community. And this is where a bit of that place attachment came into play. I know I didn't focus on that as much in the presentation, but there were a number of volunteers who said, yeah, I grew up here. I went to this stream as a kid. I care about it for my grandchildren. You know, I want to protect it for them. A sort of sense of ownership and that it was theirs to protect. And that was neat to see come through with some folks. And this second is from one of the interviews. This particular person, they said during the interview, "I think there was some person once who said that the main things in life are the 4 L's: to live, to love, to learn, and to leave a legacy," he said, or something like that. I looked this quote up. It sounded familiar, but I wasn't entirely sure who. And this is actually a Stephen Covey quote, if you're familiar with Stephen Covey. So I just thought this was a great kind of take-home message and just food for thought, something to ponder. You know, what in this case, this volunteer was saying his legacy is to do something for the environment, to do something for future generations, to make sure that those natural resources stay healthy and stay pristine for the people to come. So I thought it was really inspiring and just a great way to kind of look at life and consider getting involved in a program like this, and why some people do. So that's all I have for you today. I would like to say thank you to all of these people, particularly my thesis committee, Dr. Chris Stepanup, Dr. Pat Stakowski, and Dr. Jane Kolodinsky for all of their time and assistance, as well as my project collaborators, and of course, all of the volunteers who participated, again, voluntarily. So thanks to all of you. And I think now I'll turn it back to Caroline and move into questions.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for being with us. So for those of you that are joining right now, I'm going to start sharing my screen. We'd love for you to stick around to hear, do a final feedback poll after questions, as well as a take-home activity. And maybe, Rachel, while I'm getting to my slide, would you mind kind of answering about maybe how you got to the position that you did today? Why did you choose going to grad school or water quality field, etc.?
Sure, yeah. So as Caroline mentioned in my intro, I grew up near tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. So I had a creek that ran through my backyard. So as a kid, I was just always outside traipsing through the water. But it wasn't until high school, I took an AP environmental science course in 10th grade. And I hadn't really heard of environmental science before. I'd taken a lot of earth science, but environmental science was something new and different. And it kind of just clicked with me. And I said, by that time, 10th grade, I kind of started thinking about college. And I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I did. I went to school at Salisbury University. I graduated with a degree in environmental studies and geography. I came in as an environmental studies major as a freshman and ended up still there as a senior. And after graduating, I had been thinking about, next steps. And I knew at some point I'd want to go to graduate school to refine my knowledge and learn a little more specifically about, I became at that point interested in environmental education, volunteer coordination, community engagement. I realized I really enjoyed all of those things. And so I was like, well, what better opportunity than to do a master's in something along those lines and something that's a bit more specialized. So I got connected with Chris. She's had many, many years in volunteer coordination and things of the like. And we, sat down together when I got to the University of Vermont and went there. It's on the East Coast, but also I wanted to go to Vermont. I hadn't been to the Northeast, and just they have a great environmental school. So something, just an opportunity you can't pass away. So that's kind of how I ended up at Vermont, and it's been a joy to work with volunteers and get into research more. I hadn't really done that as much. So yeah, kind of something that I guess kind of came out of childhood and evolved through life.
Awesome. No, we love to have it. And I don't think you threw it in there anywhere. And I forgot to do it in the beginning too. We were fortunate enough, as Watershed Alliance, that you worked with us as well. That, you started in the volunteer side of things and really were knee deep in it with us as well. And spent the summer with us going out on the boat. And then even when you were completing your thesis work, you were still willing to say, hey, I can't do it as a paid position anymore, but I still want to volunteer, which speaks wonders to your involvement in a volunteer program. So we were lucky to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Yeah, it was great to be with you. Should have mentioned that.
So we have a question coming in from Margaret, and her question is, how are your partners in these 3 countries using the research data to inform their programming?
That's a great question, Margaret. So these people, these 3 collaborators we have and more, but the 3 main collaborators in each place, we had pre-existing connections with them, and they were interested to know more about their volunteer base. They didn't really know why people were getting involved. And so that was sort of what drove creating this project. And in the end, what I'll be doing is writing up a report of sorts to share with them. I won't share my entire thesis unless they're interested, but 1-2+ page report that is specific to their group. So I know from the survey, I asked people to let me know which group they were part of. So I'm able to know which group they belong to. And I'll be giving that information back to the coordinators so that they're able to have a better idea of why people get involved. We left a free response section so people could give some more feedback. So they were able to give feedback on the program. Some folks spoke to things they thought could be different, or things they really enjoyed, or some things they didn't like as much. So the survey encompassed questions, anywhere from how long it took them to do what they did to how they feel about their site, how many hours they spend doing it, things like that. So all of this information that could be useful to their coordinators who hadn't previously asked those sorts of questions from people necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think that it's really important information. I remember running a volunteer group as part of an old position that I had, and I was in charge of a work weekend. And the number one motivating factor, I think, if I were to kind of do the study, which I didn't do, would probably be that we offered free food for the weekend. It was like, hey, come and live in a cabin with your family, and we're going to make you dust and vacuum and do carpentry work. But there's free food for 2 days worth, and so it's interesting. Motivation, it can come in many different forms. It's cool to dive down into that one. So participants, feel free to throw in some more questions. Rachel's still around, but until some more come in, maybe Rachel, can you talk about what was your favorite part?
My favorite part? Oh, that's a tough question. I really enjoyed the interviews, I'd have to say. I really liked sitting down with people and getting to chat with them about why they get involved and outcomes of participation. I also didn't touch on that as much, but we did ask people, as a result of participating, have you gotten involved in other things? And so I think that was probably what I enjoyed the most. And of course, I was very fortunate to get to travel, especially as a master's student. So that was a really neat experience. So that, probably that would be my favorite part.
Sounds good. We've got some good questions coming in. So I guess I'm just gonna go down the list, but one made me smile in particular. But Margaret asks a second question saying, what are the next steps for this research in your career? PhD ?
Another good question. So right now at this stage, I'm looking into getting into environmental education. So after working with the Watershed Alliance, as Caroline mentioned, and being more hands-on and more involved with K through 12 programming and community outreach, I really realized I really enjoy that type of work. And this came out of the research as well. Like I mentioned, getting to meet with people and chat with them. I really enjoyed that. And so currently I'm looking for a job I'll graduate. I'm finishing up this summer and looking for a job, next fall or hopefully next fall. Something in environmental education. I'd love to work with kids, love working with kids. So that's the plan at this point in time. Who knows if a PhD will be in the future? That's still up for debate. But at this point, I'm looking forward to getting into the workforce and working with communities and people who, getting more people involved in science who maybe, otherwise might not have those sorts of opportunities.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. A question coming in from Kim saying, how can we find citizen science opportunities here in Vermont?
Oh, that's a great question. So the one I'm most familiar with is the Vermont Lay Monitoring Program, which, as I mentioned, is on lakes. So I'm trying to think of the name. The Vermont Center for Eco Studies, I know, is another place that does do some programming and citizen science type programs. I would even say, if you don't mind me putting in a plug for you all at Watershed Alliance, that could be a great connection too, since you all work with community members. The Department of Environmental Conservation, I think, also has something. I'd have to get back to you with something more specific. I'm kind of all over the place with different ideas ping-ponging around in my mind. But Nature Conservancy in Vermont, I think, has some too. And Audubon Vermont, if you're interested in birds. So those are a few, at least to get you started, someone to talk to.
Yeah, and Nate's doing the behind the scenes work and throwing in some, I think, taking the information that you have and quickly doing a Google search and then throwing it in the chat box. But Kim, I think what I can say too is Rachel has provided her email as well, so she might be able to just directly send you there. But also, I mean, you also have a direct connection with us at Watershed Alliance from being a teacher that works with us. That if you are interested in more opportunities, send an email our way and we can point you in the right direction. But, you know, ones that come to mind for me are, you know, citizen science when it comes to studying algae blooms or bird surveys, water surveys. There's a big one in Vermont with herps, or herpetology, going out and doing salamanders and seeing frogs and helping them cross the road safely. So I've not partaken directly, but I worked for Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and I know that that's a huge project that happens. And a fun one that you get to do with kids and families.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I see in the chat too. Yeah, Chris has put a few other things there, like Champlain Committee, North Branch Nature Center. Yeah.
But great question. All right, and then the one that made me giggle earlier, Chris, I noticed a volunteer laying on the ground. Were ticks not an issue in New Zealand?
Yeah, actually, not that they ever mentioned. So that was not, you know, I know that's a big thing in Vermont. But bugs definitely, but it was summer when I was there, and they hadn't mentioned ticks. What I think, speculating, I think they don't have, New Zealand, since it's an island, they don't really have mammals, so I don't think they have many hosts for ticks. I'd have to look into that more, but that was something I was concerned about, that they said, you know, that was not mentioned as a concern. It was more just bugs. So my guess would be they don't have many hosts for ticks there in New Zealand. Really, their only mammals are small things like weasels or rabbits, things like that. So there was no concern there. That's a good question. Something I didn't really think about.
All right, and I think we got one more rolling in. It'll probably be our last one, and then we'll move on to the feedback poll. It's from Margaret again, saying, what do you think about the role of citizen science in increasing science and ecological literacy?
You know, I think there is a great opportunity that exists there. I think that it can depend on the program structure too. You know, if people really just want to get involved with kind of collecting data or being involved in science, maybe perhaps they're not necessarily thinking about increasing science and ecological literacy, but I do think that there is a great benefit there. Going back to some of those outcomes that I listed at the beginning of knowledge gain and social diffusion. So I definitely think that that opportunity exists, and that citizen science can be a way to do that, to provide an avenue for people to learn about science or about the environment or about specific animals in a different way. Not, you know, it's not a traditional setting about sitting down necessarily and reading through books or papers or what have you. But I think a lot of that does come with participating in these programs. Most of them have some sort of training where volunteers are trained. And so I do think that, and this is just more from my, you know, kind of offhand experience talking with people, that they have said, you know, now I know what lives in the stream. I had no idea we had, you know, this type of fish, or, you know, so I think that is something that comes out of the program, whether people necessarily consciously realize it or not. So absolutely.
Yeah, that gets me thinking. I mean, coincidentally, my thesis work was on environmental knowledge and just literacy, and you can really break those down into, and there's a lot of debates about what goes into literacy, but, you know, at the core basis of environmental education, they say that it starts with knowledge, and, you know, then knowledge becomes awareness, and awareness becomes action. And so that question from Margaret got me thinking, you know, are people getting involved in citizen science after they've felt already that they have started that knowledge gain, that they're more aware. And so like the next step is a citizen science projects to continue that cycle. But maybe it could be an initial step as well by bringing that friend along who doesn't have any of those. But so great question and great response.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna continue moving forward. Just feel free to check out that chat box. Lots of resources coming in about where to find citizen science projects. So Ashley and Nate, maybe that's something that we want to consider on our website, is a place to point people in directions on our resource page. But that's a side tangent for the staff. All right, so I'm going to quickly launch a feedback poll, or at least I think I can. So it should be popping up on your screen right now, but I'm going to continue moving forward while some people are rolling in with some answers in that one. So Rachel had this take-home activity, pretty simple, pretty basic, but just how about you go out and make general observations at a stream or a river near your home. There's lots of questions that you can ask, but some of the ones that Rachel highlighted were, what's the weather like? What's the color of the water? Does it have a smell? What's the vegetation like? Is there grasses, large trees, etc.? Are the stream banks eroded? So it's a fun activity. You can go, and I've done quiet sit spots before. And if you're with a younger family that wants to run around that quiet sit spot for, it could be 30 seconds, it could be a minute, it could be 10 minutes, whatever, and just make those observations and come back together and talk about and see what you did. I love the nature journal side of things. Anything you want to add to that, Rachel?
I don't think so. I think something that's interesting just would be doing it, multiple days a week, or do some period of time and see, does it change to, then going back and looking through your journal and seeing if, you notice any sort of pattern or anything like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, let's talk about what's up next. So we are going to have a presentation called Small but Powerful, Understanding the Daily Vertical Migrations of Mysid Shrimp in Lake Champlain. This will be happening this Friday. And let me just move some things on my screen so I can read the description. It says, when you think of animal migration, what comes to mind? Many animals, including monarch butterflies, fish, and birds, migrate every year for different reasons. Mysids are shrimp-like organisms that remain at the very bottom of Lake Champlain during the day and migrate up the water column at night. Mysids can grow up to 1 inch and migrate more than 200 feet in one night. Join Rosie Chapina to learn more about mysids, the role these critters play in the ecosystems, and why understanding their migration patterns in Lake Champlain is important.